All right. First, thanks to Lauren for introducing this session just some seconds ago. Good morning, afternoon, evening, night, everyone, wherever you are. So very happy to welcome you to this session on global satellite businesses. Sorry, a new word. So clearly, a new word might be that the word has changed a little during this year. But certainly as well, the entire space industry continues to evolve, change, transform, both in terms of technology, but also very much in terms of economics. So to address this topic today, I'm very pleased to have virtually this year leaders from our industry, and across the screens you could see Steve Collard, President and CEO of SCS, Rodolphe Belmer, CEO of Eutelsat, Steve Spengler, CEO of Intelsat, Rick Baldridge, President and CEO of Viasat, and I take the opportunity to congratulate you, Rick, for the new position just since last week, if I'm not mistaken, and Pradman, Kaul, CEO of Hughes. So first, thanks a lot to all of you to be here with me today, especially to Rick very early his time, as you could see on the screen. So before getting into quite a set of discussion topics, I would like to invite you to give us kind of a few highlights of what your company has been doing in recent months, some of the dynamics you see in the sector and for your respective businesses. So as I started my introduction, maybe Steve Collard from SCS, could you get started, please?
Sure. Thanks very much, Pacôme, and add my congratulations, Rick. Great to see that announcement, and very, very happy, and congratulations. Look forward to working with you in that new role, although a new role that we've kind of got used to you in anyway. So congrats. Yeah, look, I think I probably speak for all of us. It's been a tough period, right? It's been a really, really tough year, not just from a business perspective, but I think from a human perspective, an emotional perspective, running an organization and leading through what has been, on a global level, one of the most challenging periods that we've lived through. I think the news of this morning, we're all kind of, at least I'm optimistic and hopeful that this announcement around a vaccine really turns out to be as good as it sounds, because I think it's the thing that will, ultimately move us on through this whole thing. Look, despite all of that, and that's kind of top of my mind, I think from a business standpoint, things have been relatively better than that, right? I think our industry is a resilient one. Our business is a resilient one. We had our Q3 a couple of days ago, and again we're showing good growth in our networks business, notwithstanding some of the verticals that we serve being among those that are most affected. Ongoing resilience of our video business, and continue to grow the number of households that we reach, continue to grow the number of channels that we carry. So I think it's sort of evidence of, and sort of further vindication that our industry is one that does well and sort of relatively damps. One of the challenges for us is it's very hard for us to grow really extraordinarily high, but it's also very good that in more challenging periods we've got a very strong business model, a lot of resilience, and a lot of very strong verticals that we serve. So, and look, I mean, from our standpoint, we're approaching a very exciting time again. So we're launching SES 17 very soon. So that's sort of connectivity, particularly to aviation over North America, and hopefully right at the time where that market comes back strongly. And then we've got our second generation of O3B coming with O3B mPOWER, and that sort of starts to launch next year as well. And we're looking to build on a bunch of the stuff that we've announced over the course of the last year, including what we think is leadership in cloud, our strong partnership with Microsoft, everything that we're doing to automate the network, everything we're doing to sort of develop this sort of open platform architecture. So yeah, challenging period, but looking forward to the future with a fair bit of optimism.
Thanks a lot, Steve. So we'll certainly come back to some of the items you mentioned a bit later, I guess, in the discussion. Thanks for this. Rodolphe, maybe for Eutelsat.
Yes, well, thank you, Pacôme. For our own business at Eutelsat, our recent results have illustrated well that our activity is extremely resilient to the crisis. Revenues have been in line with expectations, and we have generated record levels of free cash flow, which has enabled us to reinforce our financial position. In particular, I must say that the broadcast activity, which is so important to the valuation of our company, has been very robust, has shown very resilient. And as you know, probably because we have communicated extensively on that, we recently renewed on very good terms a large contract with Sky Italia, which is our largest customer. The parts of our business which have suffered are naturally the occasional use and the connectivity verticals. But still, we must say that in the connectivity verticals, we see different dynamics in the maritime segment, which has continued to show very well-oriented, and the aviation segment, which has marked some recess, obviously. Looking ahead, I must say that I'm very confident not only in the resilience of our industry, but I also believe that the current situation will reinforce the relevance of the satellite as part of the connectivity ecosystem, where there is a demand for high quality connectivity. On the medium to long term, just a few words. I don't want to take too much time, but what we stay focused on the same two key growth drivers for our company, focusing on two main segments of activity, which are both in the connectivity verticals. First, fixed broadband. It's a priority, I think, that we share with our friends from of Viasat. Fixed broadband, where we think that there is a very significant business potential for expansion in that segment. And also, even though it's a secondary priority for us, we continue to focus on mobility, both in-flight and mobile connectivity, both for in-flight connectivity and maritime. And in those two segments, we expect in recovery in the longer term from the impact of the current COVID crisis. We are just adding a third leg to this strategy with the IoT, the Internet of Things, where we are developing a constellation made of very small satellites that we call ELO to address that segment that we see as a further opportunity of growth for us, but in the longer term. In conclusion of these opening words, I would say that 2021 will represent a turning point in our fixed broadband strategy with the imminent entry into service of our Connect satellite, where we have very large commitments, pre-commitments for our capacity, and with the acquisition very recently of Big Blue Broadband, which will become our distributor in the consumer segment in the world, retailing our capacity directly in the consumer segment. So in the context of this pandemic, I'm still quite optimistic on the future of our industry and in the future of our group.
Thanks a lot, Rodolphe. And again, I'm sure some topics you mentioned on broadband, but also broadcast are certainly topics on which we'll come back. Steve, Spengler for Intelsat, if you want to go next. Thanks.
Well, like Rodolphe and Steve said, I mean, it's been a remarkable year, actually, in many ways, a year that we didn't expect, any of us. And, I think we have seen, just has been said, that what we do is important. What we do in satellite communications and delivering these services that we deliver to our customers is really essential. And, I'm very pleased with how our team has responded to that and has managed through the sort of seamless transition to this weird work environment that we're in. And I'm sure that's the same with other companies as well. But it does create a challenge in managing and leading people. And the human aspect, I think Steve was right to point out, is so critical these days. So, from a business standpoint, it has shown resilience. I mean, the pandemic has impacted certain areas like mobility and small part of media, but for the most part, it's been business as usual. And actually, as I said, it's proven that what we do is more important than ever. But of course, COVID is only part of the Intelsat story this year. We have a few other things happening that are of major significance. The first of which is the work we're doing in the U.S. in basically redesigning, re-engineering, and redeploying our media networks as part of the FCC C-band project. This is not trivial. It's a huge project and it's moving well. In the spring, we embarked on a financial restructuring. Pleased to say that that's moving to plan, and we're optimistic about what the outcome will be for our company in positioning us for the future. And then, of course, just at the end of August, 1st of September, we announced our acquisition of the GoGo commercial aviation business, which we believe is a big step forward in a growing market. And we're very active, of course, right now in the integration planning for that entity to join Intelsat in the coming months. So if COVID were not enough, these other major initiatives are layered on top of it. And so it has not been a typical year. It's had its challenges, but I'm very optimistic. I mean, I think what we do is critically important. Collectively, we make a difference in the world, and we're going to be well positioned once we come out of this COVID era to really continue to serve customers and make an impact.
Thanks a lot, Steve. And again, covering mobility of the topics for the company. We'll come back to that. Heading to Rick. So from Viasat perspective for this year, you announced as well just a new client win, I think even either this morning or yesterday, but whatever. Happy to get your first thoughts on this year for the sector and the company.
Yeah, so thanks, Pacôme. It's been a challenging year, especially when you see a big segment of your business go from very rapid growth to 10%, within a month when this pandemic happened on our mobility network. So we took a lot of cost out of the company. So we stepped up right away, and we had a big reduction in force for us, very large reduction in force, and then we're very aggressive on some other costs. So financially, the year's been quite good for our company so far. We acted early, and the outcomes of that are showing up. From a growth standpoint, we just, I think the one thing that the pandemic has highlighted is people need connectivity. So there was groups of people, especially here in the U.S., that all of a sudden, if you can't go to school and the only way to get educated is through Zoom classes, and that it really highlighted this gap between the people that had connectivity and the people that don't. And we all know that gap exists globally all the time, but you can kind of ignore it until it happens to you. So there's an example here at UCSD. In 2 previous years, they had done about 200 telehealth sessions. Within a week after the pandemic hit, they were averaging 1,200 a day. So, and these were people that have access to doctors, but for a moment you're denied. And so that problem globally is a huge problem. So education, telehealth, banking, those types of things, that's what we're hyper focused on, building satellites that can overcome that cost barrier and get to people on a global basis. And it's just been a real highlight of the mission that we've been on. We have 3 satellites, as you guys know, that will cover the globe under construction. The first one, we're about to deliver the payload to Boeing, and then the second and third one come, within 6 months and 6 months after that. So that's what I'm hyper focused on, that and the automation tools, so we can manage this thing globally, and certainly working with the other guys here on the screen. You can be a competitor, but you also need to be a partner at times. And so I'm looking forward to that.
Thanks a lot, Rick. Yeah, certainly broadband has been very much needed, and just for this session today would be a good example of how the events business had to adapt, let's say. Pradman, from a Hughes perspective for this year.
Thank you, Pacôme. Yeah, Hughes has had an interesting year. It's obviously all the elements that the other gentlemen have talked about today pretty much has applied to Hughes also. But I think the couple of things that stand out in terms of specials efforts that we have had to make is one, adjust obviously to the way of doing business. We traditionally did business in a certain way for the last 30, 40 years, and suddenly we had to operate in a different environment. For a few months, we had a total lockdown, so nobody was coming into work at all, and everybody was working from home. Now, I think adjusted very well to that, especially in the consumer business, which actually saw growth rather than what we would normally expect that we would see a contraction of that business. We really felt that the demand increased, and our financials were much better for the last 3 quarters than they were the same periods in the previous years. Unfortunately, our beams in the United States were pretty much full, so we had to constrain the growth that we could envision for our business. And in Latin America, because where we didn't have the constraint, we grew dramatically our consumer business in Brazil, in Mexico, and Peru, Chile, Colombia. We've been doing very, very well. So our numbers look good, the business looks good, the people are working hard, but primarily working totally differently. From a customer perspective, our enterprise customers and our enterprise business is probably been affected the most, because I think the human interface in the consumer business is very minimal, but the human interface in the enterprise business is pretty large. To be able to book a new contract with a major Fortune 500 customer requires a lot of personal hand-holding, contacts at different levels, which was difficult to achieve, and we're still struggling to figure out the best way to do that. But all in all, a good year for Hughes so far, and a good prognosis for the future.
Thanks a lot, Pradman. So, well, after this first round, I would say a few words is certainly about resilience. Obviously, focused issues, it can be deep issues in certain verticals, and overall room for growth and hope for the future. I hope I summarized that relatively well with all the operational challenges you could think of. So maybe I would like to focus on a few verticals, and I would say it's about the vertical, but how to make the new growth happen. So, and transformation in the industry. Starting with the mobility market, really, the question to you. So mobility, or if I was to do it in a bit of a simplistic way, you obviously have the Aero business. You have some special maritime business like cruise that's very unique in its requirement, and then you may have merchant shipping or others. But so if you look at mobility, there is the opportunity out there. There is obviously the huge impact on the Aero sectors this year. We also see airlines that think of their future still. Some have made announcement, we know, and I've had the opportunity to work with a few of them. So they're working very hard at making decisions for the next 3, 5, 8 years in terms of what they would need to support the broadband experience that they look for, and how to make that kind of broadband experience, how to make it happen. So how can the industry on the one side adapt, obviously, to the current context where you need to plan for the future, but I think Rick mentioned about adapting also current resources and everything, and I think this has very much impacted service providers. Steve, Intelsat had that transaction you mentioned that certainly changes the level of vertical integration in the industry when we look at the landscape. So how to deliver the bandwidth or the experience that users need in 3-4 years out, when hopefully, tentatively, through the 1 to 2 years, we may reach a low, but then the industry shall rebound, whatever, and hopefully the sooner the better, for sure. So we'd like to start. Maybe, Steve, I mentioned the transaction. So for Intelsat, if you would like to comment.
Well, I mean, obviously, this transaction was motivated by the fact that we feel very strongly about the growth prospects for in-flight connectivity over the long term. We think it's going to be a double-digit grower if you look at the next decade. Obviously, significantly challenged by COVID right now and the impact that we're seeing. But as we looked at this investment, we looked at it from the view of a capacity provider to the service provider layer. And in our view, the service provider layer really wasn't performing optimally, and it has challenges, as we've seen. And so separating the provision of the network and the provision of the service was extremely inefficient in the model that we were serving. And so the impact was really felt by customers and end users. And so by vertically integrating here, it's our view that we're going to be able to dramatically change the customer experience. We're going to be able to deliver the right economics to the airlines in particular as they move to a free model potentially in the future. And we're going to be able to really enhance that user experience in the end, which is the critical part. So we're excited about it. Our integration planning is well underway. Obviously, this takes effort on our part. We're going to be making some significant network investments to support this in the next generation of our high throughput satellites, which we'll be talking about in the future. But we think this is a long-term growth area for the company and for the industry as a whole.
Thank you. And maybe talking through the transition, how to manage current status, and then work on the growth or rebound, Drake. So your perspective that could be maybe on the US market and the rest of the world, and how you see this Aero business evolving potentially, and what would airlines be looking for in 2-3 years out as an experience? Can what we have today be sufficient, or what do we need to deliver what they expect?
No, I think that we've been focused on this very topic, and I think that's why we were growing, is not only driving down the cost of the airlines, but trying to integrate a platform that allows other third-party payers to get involved. So changing the entire business model, the entire experience that customers go through on an airplane. I remember early on with JetBlue, when we were working with them and they had some outside consultants, and the feedback that they had was that nobody will ever, third-party payer system doesn't work, and you really can't get more than single-digit penetration on the airplane. And, the good news is they bet against that, and they bet on us, and they've been delivering free internet to their customers for the entire time that we've had a contract with them. And so they've seen higher revenue per seat associated with that, more business travelers, which we're not sure what's going to happen with that in the future. But that's given us some time to focus on other business models with the airlines. And we've invested a lot of money in terms of platforms. So I think if you're going to really make this grow, it is about customer outcomes and customer experience. We spend a lot of time looking at the overall Aero delivery market, so Airbus and Boeing, what their outlook is. And it's certainly down here in the next couple of years. I mean, they're certainly off. They've had reductions in backlog, not additions to backlog. And the airlines are retiring airplanes. So the amount of inventory that's out there is coming down, but still the forecast overall by 2030, especially in Asia, is substantial growth in this marketplace, and everybody wants to be connected. So we see good long-term growth. A lot of churn here in the near term, and so different business models and other people that are interested in getting to the customers are critical for the near term.
Thank you. And maybe opening the question or to Steve from SES or someone else and to close the discussion on mobility. So, I mean, SES has been going direct on cruise for some cruise customers, more on the wholesale so far in Aero. So there can be distinct positioning at the moment, at least in those. So do you see the ability to, drive growth as a potential short term and maybe middle term in those businesses?
Yeah, look, absolutely. We've been sort of supplying, if you like, the aviation aeronautical service providers and working in a pretty intimate way with them for the last 3-5 years. And I think we've seen between 20 and 30% growth in our aviation connectivity business over that period of time in a sustained way. And even this year, with everything that's going on, we haven't seen that dipping. And with SES 17 coming, we've got a really, really good satellite coming to the largest aviation market within the next year. So yeah, and we've taken, I mean, I think, direct versus indirect, that the importance of that can be relatively overstated. I think it's a question of getting the right level of service to the end users, to the passengers on board the plane, and you can either do that through a partnership model or you can do that direct. And there are pros and cons of each, right? I think the pro that we see in working with all of the various different service providers is we get access to, significant amount of the fleet, right? So whoever wins kind of thing, we have, let's say, 4 chances in 6, if that's a smart way of putting it. We certainly look forward to continuing to serve Steve as they acquire GoGo, who are one of our larger customers. And I think it will change, right? I think, we've seen with Intelsat's move, I think that, the sort of traditional positions of satellite operators and service providers will evolve. And the thing that will determine sort of success and failure is just doing a great job delivering services to end users.
All right. And maybe much in line with or guiding the agreement between Hughes and Inmarsat, Pradman, it will be also a lot about the ability to connect network together, or let's say have the ability to partner, but also technically speaking, to have compatible assets or equipment that allows you to switch from a network to another, which still requires some efforts, I think.
Mm-hmm. Yes. I think, our strategy has been very simple. We weren't going and offering a service directly to the end user, but working through our IFC partners. So initially, we had partnerships with Global Eagle, and we supply equipment to SES for SES 17. And we recently announced, as you mentioned, the partnership with Inmarsat, which is interesting because between Inmarsat's assets and the assets that Hughes has over the continental United States, we can now offer global networks with a lot of capacity and a lot of broadband speeds that are available. And so we're excited about that. But I think we have partnerships with almost 3-4 different IFCs, and we expect to continue to do that and continue to offer technology, equipment, and services to all of them.
Thanks a lot.
So we expect to see good growth in our business in the mobility sector in this area.
Okay, so just before moving to the next topic, Steve, Spengler actually just got a question from the audience popping in about the synergies on the GoGo story. So are there anything, and in the traditional view between operators and service provider, there is a question of capacity agreement, and the synergies you see are the long-term agreements already signed with GoGo kind of a constraint to optimizing the business, or do you see this as any case as required to deliver the services that GoGo has either today or in its backlog or whatever? And I don't know what's the question. I'm just getting it passed to me.
Okay. Well, I think as Steve referenced, I mean, we are, as call it Intelsat commercial aviation in the future, we're still going to be partnered with other satellite operators to provide services, but we're also going to be building out our own network further to serve those requirements as growth goes forward. We do expect there to be a lot of growth. I think it creates opportunities, as Pradman was saying, for partnership opportunities across the industry to serve customers and to build out networks. And so, we think it will be incorporating all of that in the future. But the most important thing is being able to be with the end service provider to plan, to develop network solutions, and to get the right solution with the right economics to the end user is the critical part, especially when we're facing a new opportunity here with growth that should come from more free Wi-Fi across global networks of airlines.
Thank you, Steve. So maybe moving to what remains the largest revenue source for most operators, which is the broadcast sector. So admittedly, we see kind of the eroding trend continuing for at least part of the mature businesses. So at the same time, I think, Rodolphe, you mentioned about the Sky Italia renewal. That seems to be more or less stable, at least in terms of economics, without all the details. So there is certainly the video distribution business, and there is a DTH business. So through this COVID period, through, media consumption, through the signs you could see or recent renewals on the DTH part, for example, there has been question on, resilience now, but resilience today, or when certain contracts come to renewal, actually, for certain large ones with main DTH players. So starting with you, maybe what is your view at those renewal perspectives or dynamics you see in this business for value creation?
Well, in the video segment, first, I should mention that most of the big renewals are with our largest customers are behind us. We have renewed our large contracts with Canal Plus, with MultiChoice, with Sky most recently. All those contracts were renewed in good terms and with economics which are more or less stable. With the last one being Sky, that we have renewed in conditions which are stable financially speaking, meaning that we lost a little bit of volume, but we're able to increase price in the same kind of price per transponder in the same kind of proportion. And it reinforces us in the view that the broadcast segment, especially for our company, which focuses for a large part towards the emerging markets and the DTH subsegment. Well, these activities are extremely resilient, and we think we are able to continue to further improve, I should say, the cash flow generation of this vertical. We are able to stabilize revenues while we are able to gain from productivity gains, meaning from operational cost savings, because this segment are at maturity. We focus on streamlining the cost of operations, and also because we are benefiting from the lower cost of the launches and of the satellite themselves. Meaning that this segment, even though it's not due to grow significantly in the future, it will stay at sort of maturity, resilience, very slightly declining. We think that the cash flow production will be very significant. If you want to enter more in details in our own activity, we see a slight erosion of our business in Western Europe, notably at our hotbed position, which is compensated by the growth in demand, in volume, and in value in the emerging markets, and that's for the main dynamics at stake in this segment. It means that we are quite comfortable that and quite reassured by the future stability of that broadcast segment, despite the strong development of OTT, which is absolutely we are only at the beginning of that. and the fact that we're able to continue to extract more cash flow out of that segment enables us to solidify our balance sheet, plus invest a lot in the connectivity segments.
Thank you. So maybe on that, another dimension. So DTH will be pretty resilient. So distribution to cable networks and others is the one area that seems to have been the most impacted, let's say, for a variety of reasons, obviously. So Steve, maybe on the one side, I think you even mentioned in some of your quarterly reporting about the US market keeping eroding, which I think works together for a part with the C-band overall scheme and transition to a certain extent. And I know you invested as well in a new facility in the UK, I think, for your video operations just this year, if I'm right. So maybe not the best year for live events, unfortunately, but I think preparing the future and optimization there.
Yeah, so I mean, I agree with what Rodolphe said, and Eutelsat did a great deal with Sky Italia, and we're really happy to see that kind of thing, right? Because I think we all benefit from ongoing kind of stability and sort of health, let's say, in our collective broadcast business. We just did a big renewal with Canal Plus, so 230 million of additional backlog that we've added, and we announced just this last week. So that, kind of was our equivalent, if you like, and gave us a lot of, reassurance that this business will go out for a very, very significant period of time. It was a deal that sort of took us through the end of the decade, which, when our customers are making those kind of commitments, that says very good things about our business model and the importance of satellite in the overall environment. What we see kind of beyond that is, and I'll come on to the US market in a second, what we see beyond that is an increasing interest in a hybrid world. So a world where our customers are looking to connect not only over satellite, but also terrestrially. And that there's value, we think, in being the operator that brings those two things together. And so, it's one of the things that we're looking to leverage our kind of current thinking around the cloud. We're sort of talking to our customers about, building them platforms that enable their customers to sort of access content, both linear and live over satellite, but also OTT. And that's really interesting. And I think we're in a relatively unique position to be able to provide solutions. It's something that we've spent a fair amount of time thinking about, and I'm optimistic that that's going to, underpin, if you like, a lot of the value that we're delivering in this broadcast segment. And it's, it has always been the case that we're the best solution. We collectively are the best solution for delivering the really, really valuable content, the content that generates all of the money effectively in the broadcast industry, and that will continue to be the case as we develop from high definition to ultra high definition and beyond. We have a fairly unique situation in the German market where we have not only a very, very sort of interesting set of public broadcasters, commercial broadcasters, pay TV in Sky, but also we operate a B2C platform where we have 2 million subscribers, and so we have some unique insights as to how things are going in that market, and using that as a bit of a reference for other markets around the world. And a lot of interest from my standpoint in how we can develop complementary, hybrid technologies. And then, in the US, look, I think with the repurposing of C-band, what we've been able to do is astounding, frankly, over the course of the last 3 years, but in particular over the last year, where we've managed to protect what is a 35, 40-year-old neighborhood, completely re-architect it, in so doing, keep our customers completely whole, and release something like $12 billion of financing into the satellite industry. I think it's extraordinary, and it's a real, I think it's a credit to those of us who were involved. Now, what the implication of that, I think, for C-band distribution in the US is that's likely to be a continuing declining market. Still a very important one, still one that serves 120 million households, but one that ultimately is going to decline given the number of other choices there are in the US. But I think that what we've managed to achieve as an industry is pretty important. and I think sets the industry in good stead going forward.
Thanks a lot. And maybe, to Steve, but also Rodolphe. So just, obviously there's been a lot of, I don't know how much publications, discussions have been about C-band this year. It could be interesting to see statistics, quite unprecedented in maybe a decade, but just very pragmatically. So with that decision of the FCC, there are the milestones to be met in order to be able to apply for the compensation. So with the satellite orders that have been put in place, with the engineering on the ground segment operations, everything that I think the two of you mentioned, at least Steve's. So at this point in time, you would consider that it's on track to meet those deadlines?
Yeah, the program is going remarkably well, very smoothly. We're making exceptional progress on that. You noted that, we've made the orders for the satellites, for the launchers, for the compression equipment, the filters, all of the on-ground services, all of that is well underway. But equally important is the engagement with customers, which has been going on for months now in terms of making sure that this huge network reconfiguration meets their needs for the future in the right way. And I believe that the engagement of the customers in this project really exemplifies what's just been said, how important satellite distribution is to these businesses. Even if it is smaller than it used to be, it's still driving the revenues for these companies. And so it's important. They want stability for the future. And as part of that, the renewals and recommitments to not only North America, but to the broader global network is part of this overall network rework and redesign. So everything is on track to meet the accelerated clearing milestones. And what we hear from the FCC is that they are also on track to commence the auction on the 8th of December. So far, so good.
Thank you. So maybe moving to the topic of, let's say, broadband, or let's call it whatever, universal access, whether it's cellular backhaul in some places, Wi-Fi hotspots, consumer broadband subscriptions. There might be a variety of options there. And maybe starting with Pradman and Rick. So on the one side, there's the US, and some of the latest news, there's been a lot about the rural fund to support universal connectivity from the FCC, where I think both companies are eligible. Certainly happy to get a word on either the competition or complementarity with some of the NGSO constellations, or at least one, looking for broadband access in the US. And if we talk about emerging markets, so a couple of questions. It can be about the growth dynamic you expect. And in practice this year, depending on countries, I could hear that in some countries, because of the lockdown, there may be demand, but you can't install. So it may have postponed some of the installations, let's say, by a quarter or two compared to initial plans that might well happen in 2021 or later this year. So on broadband, what are the dynamics of the next opportunity, and what are the economics there? Can we deliver the broadband experience at economical terms to the end users and make a profit as an operator or service company?
Okay, there's a lot of stuff you brought up.
There's a lot of stuff. So we have so much time. Happy that you give a priority to whatever you prefer there.
Okay, great. Well, let's talk about the consumer broadband first. We have over 1.5 million subscribers now, almost with about 1.25, 1.3 in the United States, and about 300 or so in South America. So that business is going great guns. We're continuing to, as I mentioned earlier, expand our business in South America at a good pace. Net subscribers keep growing every quarter. In the United States, financially, it's a very profitable business, but our growth has been stopped because our beams are full, not because the market isn't there. So the consumer business is really for us the two Americas, North America and South America, and doing good and growing in South America. And as soon as we get Jupiter 3 launched, I think the growth in North America will again start. And we'll have, another significant amount of capacity that J3 will bring into the world in both areas. So if you look at the economics of that business, it's the ARPUs keep growing every quarter because we keep offering new services to the customer that they want, and so they either use more bandwidth or they basically buy new features. So even though the growth in the total number of subs in the North America is relatively flat, we continue to grow the ARPU because of the new services that they keep buying. So so the consumer business, that's the story today. Now, when we go into the enterprise business, our basic offering is a managed network service to a Fortune 1000 company. In the United States, the method of providing this managed network service primarily is using SD-WANs. We lease capacity from the terrestrial operators, and we offer value-added services on top of that to the customers. So we have also been digressing into very sophisticated network management systems using artificial intelligence and machine learning technologies. And the result of all of this is that more and more as our networks become complex, the network management technology becomes critical in this world. And because the networks start in North America but then become global, and our ability to offer security services and other services on top of the transmission network becomes very, very important. In the international arena for enterprises, it's still the traditional VSAT solution, for banks, for gas stations, for lotteries, and that business continues to grow. And the problem with the environment we are in has slowed down the new acquisition of new customers. But again, the existing customers are doing very well. So we're ready for more growth as some of these situations improve. And the last topic I think you brought up was the integration with LEOs and MEOs. We have a partnership with OneWeb. We are an investor. We are a customer, and we are also a provider of support services to them. So that's going. I think they'll hopefully come out of bankruptcy in the next couple of weeks, and we'll launch into with full energy in their next generation of their system. So that's going very well. I think that will add a lot of steam to our enterprise business internationally.
Thank you. So, Rick, on your side, so certainly it's been a mix of consumer broadband, Wi-Fi hotspot deployment, most of the time, managing the network. So what's been your views at the growth perspectives there, and how much to manage like the broadband experience versus the ARPU that you could find in the market where in practice the user may be able to pay, $5 a month, $3, $10, whatever, and maybe now the 50 to 100 you could think of in some more developed markets.
Yeah, so we did see a little bit of a decline just because of, like you said, the installation access. By the way, I agree with everything that Pradman just said. Yeah, essentially, the ability to. So Mexico, for instance, was an area where we were doing quite well before the pandemic, and really you just lost access to people's premises, and so that was put on hold for a little while. We're seeing that come back. We're making very good progress in Brazil, Guatemala, some of the Central American areas, which, I think are what we're doing there is practicing for when Viasat 3 over the Americas comes in place, and where we can provide more more and more services. This issue of enterprise, which I think is going to be a global market vertical, that's very interesting. And it really is not about just connectivity, but as Pradman said, it's an SD-WAN solution. And then if you combine a hybrid solution with a low latency and geosatellite, then not only can you solve all the problems in terms of high speed and latency sensitive connectivity, but you have 4 nines of reliability. And what we bring to that party is a really strong security background. So that turns out to be one of the, certainly one of the jewels in our crown that helps us in the enterprise marketplace, which has been a nascent market for us for quite a while. So the ability to pay and the ability to serve these communities that can only afford dollars per month of connectivity is one of the reasons why we've designed the satellites the way we have, so we can drive costs down, get access into these rural markets. The U.S., as it applies to that, really can't talk about RDOF, but the U.S., as well as some other places, are really, they favor, just by the types of rules they have, they favor fiber connectivity in that space. So I don't see a lot of, satellite has been able to serve these rural markets in a really strong and positive way, but that, just from a subsidy standpoint, that's not where the current policy is. So we do think there's, not only is this market big already, it's getting bigger, and it's attracting bigger and bigger players, like certainly one of the LEO players. And Pradman's involved with OneWeb, and I know Steve got filings at the LEO space. We do too. I think this LEO market is going to be the biggest issue that we face as an industry here in the near term, and it's one that's at jeopardy of being monopolized if we don't all thoughtfully pursue the LEO market in a way that allows access for multiple players, multiple people to share the spectrum, because there's just not enough resources to go around if you have tens of thousands of satellites dominated by one competitor. It's not rational, it's not responsible, and it's certainly not good for the industry, nor is it good for sovereign countries that want to have their own LEO network, Japan or France or someone else. So it's really, really important that this group as a whole helps monitor and chimes in on how this is being rolled out on a global basis.
Thanks a lot. And maybe, Rodolphe, you mentioned the Big Blue broadband deal that took place over the summer. So I remember that Eutelsat already initiated a form of strategic review of its distribution network, maybe, I can't remember, 4 years ago, where there were a review of the tiers of partners there. Then you made that acquisition during the summer. So in your view, outside of having the most efficient satellite or, let's say, network possible, distribution remains the key, and you felt you had to do that transaction in order to optimize your market access and growth?
Yes. First, I'd like to say that I agree fully with what Rick said very well, and I think we should all support this kind of idea that Rick has just pushed forward. Second, on our view on the broadband to consumer segment, we believe that it's a very significant business for tomorrow, with also lots of unbanked resilience, meaning that we are pretty certain that this market is not only big, but also our ability to extract good value out of that segment over the very long period of time is quite strong, which is one of our key driver for deciding to invest in a segment. Now, of course, what has been difficult for us has been first to develop our technology strategy and to select the space assets on which we would rely to bring that capacity to homes living in the digital divide in Europe and in Africa, but also one important point of difficulty for us was the distribution. And finally, we have, after a few years of experiments and trials and errors, we now are convinced that our distribution strategy will be built on two dimensions. First, we will remain in line with our historical strategy, focus on wholesale. We will try to sell our capacity to capable distributors, and that's distributors like Orange in Europe. They have accepted to take very large portion of the capacity produced by our upcoming Connect VHTS satellite and distribute them under their brand name in their footprint and across their network of outlets in Europe. And we are chasing opportunities of that kind with other distributors across our own geographic footprint. And second, to complement that wholesale strategy, we thought we should develop our own distribution branch, and that's why we have finally decided to absorb our most important distributor, which is Big Blue, the British company specializing in distributing telecommunication services to broadband living in rural areas. And well, as you said, well, we have just done that, and we are in the process of integrating them and actually transform them in the broadband division of Eutelsat.
Thank you. So I see we already have 5 minutes left and far too many topics to cover. So I'm ask someone to jump on and make no more than a 1 minute answer to the next question. So one again in my list is about valuation of satellite businesses. So obviously it's no surprise to anyone that the stock markets have not been so great for quite a number of satellite businesses on the one side in the last 12 months. At the same time, I would say there has been relatively strong support of certain new space businesses and not necessarily telecom. I could say remote sensing, whatever kind of business you could think of. It's not for every company, but there has been equity invested for sure. So how to give back confidence maybe, or to make that the financial markets appreciate the upcoming growth potential? Who would like to take that one? 1 minute, someone. Steve Spengler, you're unmuted, so you're selected.
Okay.
You're volunteer. Okay.
Look, I firmly believe that all the challenges we talked about already, about connecting rural communities, enabling mobility broadband, the next generation of media content, all these applications and services require satellite communications to be part of it. And so I think to the degree that we can continue to invest and integrate into the broader telecom landscape, and we talked about SD-WAN already as an example, but cloud's another one, 5G is another one. The degree that we can do that as an industry is going to strengthen our perception and position and our ability to deliver growth for investors. I think everybody on this panel are all wise investors. I can't say that's true across our entire sector. So we need to put together the right business cases and attract the investors, for the things that are really going to drive growth in the future through our businesses.
Yeah, I'd add to that, Pacôme, that the market has not behaved the way it usually does, right, over the course of the last sort of 6 to 9 months. I think the stock market only saw the same level of volatility when COVID hit twice in its history, right? And so what happened was you saw a massive withdrawal of capital, and then you saw a big sort of move of that capital into growth. And the market today is valuing growth in an extraordinary way and not valuing long-term kind of value investing in the way that it traditionally has. And that's who we are largely, right? We can certainly generate growth, but as an industry, as we've talked about, we're long-term in nature. We make investments that go out 10, 15, 20 years, and we typically attract investors who are interested in making returns over that period of time. And so my view is the market always goes through, you know, what you would call short-term cycles, but in the long term, that value will return and investors kind of will return to our segment as they see us being resilient in this environment, and as they see those kind of long-term trends coming back. I'm just going to pick up on what Rick said, though, Pacôme, because you seem determined for us not to talk about it. But, you know, I think it's a really, really important point, right? We've been, you know, as you know, the bunch of us on this panel, we've been investing in space for, you know, 30, 40 years, and we've been doing it inside, you know, fairly important regulatory frameworks that are put in place to make sure that the future of the industry is preserved for everyone, right? And I think, you know, we all advocate responsible space, and we don't advocate irresponsible space. And I think, you know, until the economics are put in place to, you know, limit or dissuade companies from just launching satellites into what is going to become an increasingly congested environment, and doing so without too much mind to what happens if there are collisions in the future, if you have a whole bunch of very fast moving uncontrolled objects in the future. And as we've seen kind of the power move from the ITU to, you know, the national regulators, these sorts of things become harder to deal with. And I think it's it's one of the threats that looms largest in our industry, because until, you know, very, very deep pocketed companies are sort of required to be responsible in space, they're not going to be. And it's something that I think we all need to be concerned about.
That's good. So I think we are exactly at our 60 minutes. So we have less than 60 seconds for a final word. Maybe Pradman or Rodolphe or Rick, have you? Are we all set? We'll keep the other questions for another time, another place, potentially in Paris. Very happy, hopefully, to have the opportunity to welcome you here next year. In the meantime, I would like to thank all of you very much for being available today. Special thanks for Rick. We now see it's daytime outside, but it was very early morning when we started. So thanks a lot, Rick. Congratulations again. And thanks a lot to all of you. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Pacôme. Thanks, everyone.